Texas Hill Country, June 1871. The sun carved the sky in gold and iron, pressing down on the land like it meant to melt it into ash. Cicadas screamed in the mesquite trees, their song sharp and endless. The ground shimmered beneath the weight of heat, and across the wide, cracked prairie, the only motion was a woman swinging a mallet at a fence post with hands that should have been lifting nothing heavier than a kettle. Abigail Monroe, 6 months pregnant, and already showing like 7, wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her wrist, smearing dust across her temple. Her fingers, wrapped in torn linen, bled through the cloth. The old pine rail refused to hold. The post was long since rotted, and the barbed wire at her feet curled like the devil's own spine. She crouched, breath tight in her chest, and reached for the wire with bare hands. Her fingers found the cruel curve of metal and pulled. A barb sliced into the flesh of her palm. She hissed, but she didn't stop. Hoof beats broke the silence, coming from the east, steady, deliberate. A rider crested the dry road and slowed at the edge of her land, tipping his hat low against the blinding sun. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, his voice a low grind of gravel soaked in whiskey. "Your husband must be turning in his grave seeing you out here like that." Abigail stood, shoulders squared, blood trailing down her wrist. She met his smirk with a stare that had made stronger men blink. "My husband is in the grave," she answered coldly, "and I'm the only one left to finish what he started." He clicked his tongue and spat into the dust. Wouldn't be. If he hadn't run from the war, would he? Her grip on the hammer tightened. "Keep riding." He did, but not fast, not before muttering, "Ain't a world made for women alone, darling," as his horse kicked up dust and vanished into the horizon. Abigail turned back to the fence. Her chest burned, whether from heat or rage. She didn't know. She bent low again, her breath catching, and pulled the wire, her vision blurred. Sweat stung her eyes. She swayed. Then the world tilted. The mallet dropped from her hand. She collapsed to her knees, one arm wrapped protectively around her belly, the other pressed against the bleeding wound in her palm. The earth rolled beneath her like a wave. A shadow moved, not the rider, not someone she'd seen before. From the top of the hill, a man descended, boots whispering through the dust, hat pulled low, his tall frame wrapped in a coat stained with labor, not stitched for style. He carried nothing at first. Then, without a word, he set down a wooden crate beside her, its surface scarred from years of use. A toolbox. A second thump followed. A tin canteen. She blinked, dazed. He crouched beside her, face weathered like saddle leather, gray eyes, calm and steady, met hers without a flicker of judgment. "Drink," he said. She hesitated. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. She took the canteen, drank deep, wiped her mouth with her forearm, and narrowed her eyes. "You think I need rescuing? You're wrong." He didn't smile, didn't flinch, just motioned to the bloody post, the warped wire, the raw earth. "You need land," he said. "You need a name on paper that can't be taken, and you need someone who knows how to hold the line." She stared at him. "What are you offering?" His gaze held. "I've got all three." She rose, slow, wary, blood pounding through exhaustion, hunger, fury. "You don't know me." "I've watched you," he said. "Long enough to know you don't bend. You've been watching me." She snapped. "From the ridge, every day you're out here alone doing what 3 men wouldn't." She folded her arms, her whole body trembling with heat, grief, and the weight of everything she carried, including this stranger, and his impossible offer. "You wanted to buy me?" "No," he said. "I want to back you." Silence stretched between them. A dry wind lifted the dust. She looked at her bloodied palm, at the wire, back to him. "And what's your name?" "Thomas Delaney." She'd heard that name. A recluse. Lost his wife and boy in a land war 5 years ago. Never remarried. Never spoke. Owned more acres than any man west of San Gabriel. She let out a long breath. "You came all this way to give me your name?" "No," he said. "I came to see if you'd take it." She didn't answer, but she didn't send him away. Tom Delaney showed up the next morning without a word and started working like the land had always known him. He didn't ask where the tools were, didn't ask what needed fixing. He found the broken boards in the cattle pen and replaced them, reinforced the leaning posts at the west gate. When the sun rose high and blistered the sky, He paused only long enough to sip water before digging holes for new fence stakes. Abigail watched him from the porch, arms crossed beneath her belly, heart tight with questions. He didn't eat unless she left the food nearby and walked away. He never stepped inside the house, never asked about the child, never mentioned her husband. But he kept showing up, and the land once brittle and crumbling began to breathe again. In the evenings, she'd linger by the barn, pretending to organize tools, watching him climb the roof ladder, hammer in hand, replacing shingles by lantern light. His silence was not heavy, it was steady. His work spoke clearer than any man's words. By week's end, the cattle pen stood strong. The roof no longer leaked. The fences looked like they belonged to people who gave a damn still. She didn't trust it. One evening, with the sky dipped in copper and the wind warm as breath, she walked to him while he oiled the stable door hinges. "Why are you doing this?" He paused, eyes fixed on rusted metal, wiped the rags slow before speaking. "I can't stand to see good land go to waste." "That's it," she pushed. "That's it," he said. She stared at him. "Not because you want something. Not because you pity me." He met her eyes, really looked at her, then shook his head. "You don't need pity. You need things fixed." She almost laughed. Almost. But instead, she turned away, confused, softened by how clean and simple he made it sound. The next day, two neighbors rode in while Tom mended the front gate. One of them, Curtis Lang, had once tried to buy her land after her husband died. The other was his cousin Swagger and smirking teeth. They dismounted slow, eyes sharp on Tom like he didn't belong. "Well," Curtis said, spitting, "word is you're moving in with the Monroe widow." Tom didn't glance up, just drove another nail. "Funny," the cousin added, "how a man stays silent all his life, then decides to speak with his boots under a woman's table." Tom stood, wiped his hands, and met their stares without so much as a twitch. "I didn't move in," he said. "Didn't you?" Curtis asked. "Then what you doing here?" Tom stepped forward, voice calm as a creek in shade. "She lost her husband. She's carrying a child. She's working ground half this valley abandoned. And," Curtis said, Tom's voice never shifted, "I'm not here to buy her. I'm here to help her keep what's worth keeping. If that bothers you, I'll be here tomorrow, too." Curtis shifted, uncomfortable. Tom didn't blink. "Let's go," the cousin muttered. They left. Abigail had watched it all from the porch, one hand on her belly, heart pounding. That night, she brought him supper on a tin plate, warm and fresh. He nodded, took it gently, and ate beneath the tree, wind at his back. That night, for the first time in weeks, she slept through till morning. Tom Delaney didn't talk much, but his scars told their own tale. That no one knew exactly what happened the day his life burned down. They whispered pieces. How his wife Lily signed a deed she didn't understand. How the ink gave a rival rancher claim to their southern pasture. How Tom rode out to confront the man and returned to smoke and fire. The house gone. His wife and son inside. Asterisk, the sheriff called it an accident. Maybe a lantern tipped. Maybe Lily was confused. Maybe Tom was too long chasing shadows. But Tom knew, and that truth hollowed him. He didn't bury them in the churchyard. He built a stone wall on the ridge and laid them to rest beneath the cottonwood Lily loved. No names carved, no flowers left, only the broken hinge from their front door laid beside them. A memory of something that once swung open. Then he vanished, sold half his land not for gold, but for quiet, kept the ridge, built a cabin with no porch. Spoke to no one. Until her. He'd seen Abigail before, not close, not where her stare could cut a man, but from afar, watching her hold back the tide with bleeding hands. At first, he told himself it was nothing. Another widow on bad land, another woman outworking her grief. But the day he saw her, belly heavy with life, hands torn from wire, swinging a hammer at a fence, half dead, something inside him broke, because Lily had done the same. She'd drawn a line in the dirt with blood. And paid for it. Tom had sworn he'd never stand on ground like that again, and yet he came down from the ridge, brought tools, watched her stake the land that spat her out, watched her carry what two men couldn't, never asking for help. He didn't come to save her. He came because the world had failed too many women like her, and this time so long as breath filled his chest he would not watch another house burn. He never told her this. There was no need. But every nail he drove, every board he raised, every fence he mended held the weight of a fire he couldn't stop, and the hope that maybe something just once could be held in place before it fell. Abigail never asked what made him the way he was, and Tom never offered it. But sometimes at dusk, when the long shadows stretched over pasture and the dry grass whispered like ghosts brushing past, he'd sit behind her barn beneath the oak, hand resting on his old knife, eyes turned west toward a grave no one visited and a mistake no one forgave. And in that quiet, something in him mended, not all of it, but enough to stay. The first time Abigail set a second plate at the table, she didn't speak. She poured stew into the cracked blue bowl, set it across from hers, and sat. Tom hesitated at the door, hat in hand, dust caked on his boots and collar. She looked up once, then went back to slicing bread. He stepped inside, careful as if the house might flinch, but it didn't, and neither did she. They ate in silence, the kind not filled with distance, but worn into comfort like the soft corners of a well-loved quilt. The only sounds were the soft clink of spoons against tin, the distant hum of crickets beyond the shuttered windows, and the occasional groan of wind slipping under the eaves like a whisper that never quite reached the door. When they finished eating, he took her bowl without a word and washed it in the tin basin. No fuss, no need to be told, just quiet movement, steady hands. She stood in the doorway, leaning into the frame, her silhouette framed by lantern light, one hand resting low and protective on the swell of her belly. "You always this quiet when someone feeds you?" she asked, the barest trace of a smile tugging at the edge of her lips. Tom looked over his shoulder, water dripping from his fingers. "I speak when there's something worth saying." "That's so?" He nodded once, dried his hands with a cloth worn thin with use, and stepped back out into the night without waiting for a reply. Abigail stood there a beat longer, watching the door ease shut behind him like it knew how to close gently on its own. Then she sighed and turned down the lamp. Later that night, pain stirred her from sleep, not sharp or sudden, but deep an ache that wrapped around her lower back and clutched like a warning. She sat up slowly, heart knocking against her ribs, one hand bracing herself on the wall, the other resting protectively over her belly. Outside, a soft sound. She rose, pulled her shawl around her shoulders, and walked barefoot to the front door. The floorboards creaked beneath her steps as she opened it gently, careful not to disturb whatever hush the night had settled. Tom sat on the edge of the porch, elbows resting on his knees, his knife in hand. A long, slender strip of cedar wood lay across his lap, and he was carving it with slow, careful strokes, each curl of wood drifting like feathers to the earth. Abigail stepped closer. What are you doing?" she whispered. He didn't startle, didn't even turn his head. "Making something." She eased down beside him, groaning as her back tightened beneath her weight. Tom glanced at her belly. "You all right?" She nodded. "Just sore. Comes and goes." He handed her the bit of cedar. A name had been etched into a trough, unsure, but deliberate. The letters weren't full, not yet, but they held shape and intention. *J. Monroe Delaney. Abigail traced them with her finger. "You picked a name? I thought maybe you had." He replied. "I hadn't." Tom looked away, toward the sleeping pasture beyond the fence line, where cattle shifted beneath the hush of stars and midnight wind. "I could write you into the land deed," he said, the words sudden but quiet. "As my wife." She blinked. "You want to marry me?" "I want your name on the paper so no one else can take this place. Not Lang, not the bank, not the law." He held the carved strip tighter in his hand. "You don't need to marry me to be decent." Tom, his jaw tightened once, then went still. "No," he said, "but I need a reason to stay. I've wandered too long with none." She looked at him then, really looked, at the lines the sun had carved deep into his skin, at the shadow of grief that lived just behind his calm, at the way his hand, still holding the knife, sat steady and unflinching. "And if I said no?" She whispered. "I'd keep helping," he said, "as long as you'd let me." She laughed, her breath catching somewhere in her throat. "That's not much of a proposal." I'm not much of a man for grand things. Silence stretched between them again. But it felt different now, warmer, like the hush before something begins to bloom. She leaned gently into his shoulder. I'm not marrying you because I'm afraid, she said, or because I'm weak. I wouldn't want you to. She turned the carved wood in her hands, thumb brushing over the name, then tucked it into the pocket of her nightdress. Then come morning, she said, we'll go sign what needs signing. Tom didn't speak, but he reached out and took her hand in both of his, rough, warm, unshaking. The wind stirred the dry grass. A coyote cried far off, lonely and wild. But for once, the land around them didn't feel so empty. The papers were signed without ceremony. No preacher, no white dress, no ring glinting in the sun-drenched dust of the county clerk's office. Just ink scratched beside ink on a yellowed deed to a patch of weary Texas soil. Abigail Monroe. Thomas Delaney. The clerk didn't look up. He grunted, stamped the page, muttered something about property consolidation and tax rolls. But to Abigail, the moment cracked open something larger than it appeared to hold. Something had shifted. Not the loud, brash kind people usually meant when they spoke of marriage, but something deeper, quieter, like the feel of a strong hand braced at your back just before the wind takes hold of everything. They rode home in silence. The sun hung high. The wind dried the sweat on their necks. She held the deed in her lap like it might disappear if she let go. Tom sat beside her in the wagon, reins loose in his grip. Always steady, always aware of her. The rumors came before they even reached the ranch. By the next market day, folks were already whispering that she'd sold herself to the man on the ridge, that Delaney had finally taken a wife, and all it cost him was a broken fence and a few pails of water. That Abigail Monroe had done what Monroe women always did: survive, no matter who they had to climb into bed with. She heard it all. At the mercantile, at the feed store, even at the well, where the neighbor women gathered with their buckets and cold stares, claiming the water still tasted cleaner than hers. She said nothing. Tom said even less. But the silence between them didn't turn heavy. It became something like armor. The nights passed in quiet rhythm. Her cooking, his fixing, to people slowly learning the pattern of a second heartbeat in the same house. The baby kicked more now. She swore he recognized Tom's footsteps even if the name didn't match. Then came the rock. It shattered the bottom pane of the front window just after sundown. A sharp crack that splintered the quiet. Abigail screamed. The baby jolted. She rushed to the door, breath short, heart stammering. Outside laughter. 3 boys, young men, really, half drunk, full of swagger and bad blood. One was Lang's nephew, another the butcher's second son, the third she didn't recognize, but his hand still held another stone. Tom stepped out of the barn, slow, unshaken, like wind couldn't move him, like the earth itself steadied for his steps. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow. His boots left no sound. In his hands rested a rifle not raised, not cocked, just cradled loose like it had always belonged there. The boys froze. The one with the rock dropped it. Tom didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared, jaw locked, eyes flat and iron heavy. They shifted. One muttered something about a joke. Another backed away. Then they all turned and ran. Abigail watched from the porch, her hands trembling at her sides. But what filled her chest wasn't fear. It was pride. Later that night, she found him sitting by the door again, rifle across his knees, gaze fixed on the hills. She stepped outside, shawl wrapped tight, and stood beside him. You didn't even load the rifle, she said. Didn't need to, he replied. She reached down and took his free hand between both of hers. Thank you, she whispered, for not needing to prove anything except that you'll still be here tomorrow. Tom looked up at her, his face unreadable, but he gave her hand the slightest squeeze, and that said enough. The sky changed quickly that evening. One moment, the sun still clung to the ridge, throwing gold across the land. The next, a wall of storm clouds rolled in from the west, bruised, swollen, growling like something long overdue. The wind tore across the plains, bent the mesquites, rattled the barn doors until they clanged like loose chains. The cattle shifted uneasily. The chickens fell silent. Inside the house, Abigail clutched the edge of the table. Her breath short and sharp. Pain gripped her low and hard, then wrapped upward like a fist. She doubled over with a grunt. Not the first pain she'd felt that week, but this one didn't let go. She called for Tom once, but the wind swallowed her voice. Another contraction hit. Faster, fiercer. She sank to the kitchen floor, hands shaking as she tried to breathe. The door slammed open. Tom came in soaked from the rain, coat cast aside. His eyes found her instantly. No questions, just movement. He knelt, his hands checking her pulse, cradling her shoulders. "It's early," she gasped. He nodded once, already spreading blankets on the floor, rolling up his sleeves. "There's no doctor," she whispered. Tom's gaze met hers, calm, solid. "Then we do this here." He guided her to lean against a pillow, braced her back with quilts, lit the lanterns. The fire was long dead, but the house glowed with urgency. Rain battered the windows. Wind howled like something alive. Her cries came in waves now, raw and torn. "I can't," she sobbed. "I can't do this alone." "You're not alone," he said. And for the first time in years, his voice unfolded into more than a sentence. "You breathe with me. In, out, slow. You hold onto me and don't let go." He settled behind her, his back against the wall, arms around her shoulders, chest steady against her spine. "Lean into me," he said. "I've got you." She gripped his forearm. Nails bit skin. He didn't flinch. Time dissolved. Pain became everything. She screamed into the storm, the kind of scream full of years of grief, of every word swallowed since James died. Tom didn't move. He held her through it all, whispered even when she couldn't hear him, mopped her brow with a cool cloth, braced her when she collapsed between contractions. And when the final moment came, and the world held its breath, a gasp, a cry, a silence, so pure it felt sacred. Then a sound, a sharp, fierce wail, alive and wild. Abigail sobbed. Tom caught the child, slick and red, and wrapped it in the cloth she'd placed near the stove days ago. Just in case, he checked the lungs, the limbs, the breath, then laid the baby gently into her arms. "It's a boy," he whispered. She clutched the child to her chest, her whole body shaking with relief, with love, with the crashing weight of survival. Tears fell freely. Tom leaned forward, forehead resting gently against hers, and in that moment, beneath the golden flicker of lanterns and the slow thunder rolling away into the east, he spoke the only thing that mattered. "You don't have to. Take my name," he said, voice low and rough. "But this child, he'll never grow up not knowing who his father is." She looked up at him, eyes swollen, face pale but gaze clear, and in her silence was the answer. Tom reached out, pulled them both into his arms, mother and child, held them like they were the only thing that could steady him. Outside, the storm moved on. Inside, something quieter took root. A boy's first breath, a man's return to the world, and the quiet, unspoken making of a family. No vows, no preacher, no paper. Only the truth of who stayed when it mattered. And as morning light spilled gently across the floorboards through cracked shutters, and the warmth of dawn filled the corners of Abigail's parlor, that truth remained. Ash slept soundly in his cradle by the window, his tiny breaths rising and falling with the kind of peace only newborns carry. Abigail moved carefully, her steps hushed, as she rummaged through the old chest tucked beneath the side table. It had once held James's letters, curled receipts, faded maps, remnants of a life sealed tight since the day they buried him. She hadn't meant to open it. Something in her bones had stirred all morning, a restlessness like wind under skin, and before she knew it, the chest was unlatched and her hands were brushing back time. At the very bottom, beneath a crumbling ration packet and a photograph browned and cracked with age, she found it, a deed, stamped, notarized, dated just 1 month before James had died. She sat back, breath caught in her throat, pulse thudding in her ears, the page trembling between her fingers. Her eyes scanned the words. A transfer of property to Curtis Lang, full rights and access in exchange for the sum of. But there, in the corner, was something else. 3 words, scribbled in a different hand, rigid, deliberate. Asterisk nullified. Purchased out. Asterisk, and below it, another deed, filed after James's death, registered to Thomas Delaney, but the second signature on that line wasn't his dot, it was hers. Though she had never signed it, her breath hitched, mouth dry, eyes swimming as the truth rose slowly like a tide. Tom had bought the land. He had intercepted Lang's claim. He'd done it before the first fence post was set, before the first meal shared on her porch, before that battered old toolbox had even crossed her threshold. He had done it quietly, without ceremony, without fanfare, without telling her, without ever asking to be thanked. He had saved what James had nearly sold. She stared at the paper for what felt like hours, the silence pressing around her like the moment before a storm breaks. The house held its breath. Later that day, with Ash asleep and warm against her chest, she found Tom behind the barn, his hands moving with steady precision as he mended a worn saddle strap. She stood in the dirt, clutching the rolled-up parchment tight in her hand. "I found it," she said. He didn't look up. "Found what?" "The deed. James's. And yours." His hands stopped moving. Stillness settled in his shoulders. "You bought it out from Lang," she continued. "You stopped him from taking it before I even knew what was coming." Tom laid the strap aside, slowly, then stood to face her. "I did." She stepped closer, her voice no longer shaking, just full. "Why didn't you tell me?" His eyes met hers, steady, darkened by something older than guilt. "Because you'd already lost enough," he said quietly. "You didn't need one more man walking in, pretending to be your savior." Her grip tightened around the rolled deeds. "You could have said something. And what would it have changed?" His voice was soft now, worn. "You still would have fought for that land, still would have bled to keep it, still would have mended every fence and carried that boy alone if I hadn't shown up." She looked down at the child stirring gently against her. Her voice was barely audible. "You didn't even sign your name to the second deed." "I didn't need to." Abigail moved closer, her eyes burning not with fury, but with something tangled and tender and aching from the root. "You could have told me you were one of the good ones." Tom's jaw twitched. His gaze drifted toward the hills, toward the place where the sky folded into dust. "I'm not," he murmured. "I'm just someone who didn't want to watch another woman lose everything she shouldn't have to." The silence returned, but this time it didn't press our way. It lingered. And then, with a slow breath, Abigail reached into the fold of her dress and placed the rolled deed into his calloused hands. "I'm not giving it back," she said, her voice sure, "but I thought you should hold it at least once." He took it gently, not like a man receiving gratitude, but like someone accepting a relic, a truth, a trust. She leaned forward, her hand resting over his chest, her palm against the place where the weight of years had settled. "You know," she whispered, "you're allowed to be the reason something good lasts." Tom looked at her then, the sun catching the silver strands just beginning to lace his temples, the scars etched into his knuckles like old stories. He didn't nod in agreement but in understanding, and somewhere, between the ache of what had passed and the hush of the child dreaming between them, something unspoken finally settled into place. 1 year later, the wind still swept the Texas hills, but now it carried more than dust. It carried the scent of hay, warm bread, and something truer, something rooted. Home. The boy was walking now, legs wobbly and brave, arms flailing in the crooked dance only toddlers understand. Each morning, he toddled along the fence line, chasing shadows and speaking in secret words only the grasshoppers seemed to comprehend. His laughter rolled across the fields like soft thunder. Behind him stood the house, stronger now. The roof no longer sagged. The porch steps were new. The windows opened wide to light, not drafts, and above the door, carved neatly into a piece of sanded cedar, a sign read, ****, the Monroe Delaney Ranch. ***, there had been no wedding, no rings, no lace pressed between pages. But Abigail had moved in, one drawer at a time, until nothing was left in the old place but memories. She kept her name out of respect, but on every deed, every receipt, every corner of paper that mattered, she was Abigail Delaney, and no one in town questioned it. Curtis Lang had gone quiet the day Tom walked into the clerk's office and handed over the second deed with four simple words, ***, it belongs to her now, ***. After that, the stares stopped, the whispers died. Even the preacher tipped his hat when they passed. Neighbors brought food again. Each morning, Tom rose before dawn and brewed tea. Strong, no sugar, just a splash of milk exactly how she liked it. He brought it to her at the window, where she sat with the boy cradled in her lap, rocking gently, whispering lullabies only the wind could hear. "Thank you," she would whisper. He'd kiss her hair, then head out to the fields. She never asked where he walked. She knew. He checked the fences, the gates, the old cottonwood tree where his first family lay. And beside the rusted hinge of that handmade cross, there was now a new stone, small, unmarked, but placed with care. That spring, a census clerk arrived, pencil poised, ready to catalog what the land held. "What's the boy's name?" he asked. "James," Abigail said, holding her son as he chewed gently on her sleeve. "Family name," she nodded. "He's named for the man who gave him life and the man who gave him a future." Tom stood in the doorway, arms folded. He said nothing, but in his eyes something softened, not surprise, just acceptance. The baby had James's hair, but Tom's stillness, the way he watched the world first, then acted, the way he listened like silence held secrets worth keeping. That summer, they painted the barn together. Abigail climbed the ladder. Tom steadied it with one hand. The boy played nearby, stacking pebbles, speaking his own wine-tangled language to no one and everything at once. Later, they sat on the porch, legs dusty, shoulders brushing with the ease of years. "You ever miss the quiet?" she asked. Tom looked at her, then at the child. "No," he said, voice low. "Not this kind." The wind rustled the tall grass. The windmill turned. A hawk cried far off. Abigail leaned into him. He rested his hand over hers. They had never needed a ceremony. The truth of them lived in every fence they mended, in the firewood he split and stacked, in the laughter that had filled rooms once hollowed by silence and grief from afar. The ranch looked small, just a house, a barn, a well, and a tree. But to them, it was everything, a place claimed not by force, but by care, a wound healed not by forgetting, but by choosing to stay. And the boy, running wild along the fence line, his mother calling gently, his father tipping his hat against the blaze of sun, would grow knowing he was not born of luck, but of something far stronger choice. Because out here, the West never asked for heroes. It asked for men who stayed when others turned away. And when Thomas Delaney gave his name, he gave back everything he once thought he had lost. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you that love doesn't need noise to last, only steadiness, only hands that build and arms that stay, then you're already part of our world. Here at *** Wild West Love Stories ***, we bring you tales of devotion that outlast bullets, outlive storms, and echo beyond time. Stories where hearts speak louder than guns, and the strongest ones don't ride off, they stay. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that echo through dust and silence, because out here, love doesn't need saving. It just needs someone who stays.